Hello students. So welcome once again. In the last class what we were discussing was we were talking about the chapter called as photosynthesis, and some of the portion we have already discussed. We have now had to some extent we have an idea about the chapter, right? And in the last class up till I think almost up till light reaction, we just had an idea the where does light reaction occur, what are the products of light reaction, etc., etc. So we'll be discussing today the remaining portion of the chapter. So as you know, the first class was also we were talking about the summary of the chapter, and even today would be talking about the summary of the chapter, and obviously not in details. Once we are done with the summary, once we have an idea about the entire chapter, after that we are going to start our chapter in details. We are going to write our notes, etc., etc. Right? So let's start the class. In the last class, what we have talked about is we have certain idea. When we talk about this, we remember that we have talked about it as a reaction. What type of a reaction we remember. So we are not going to write it down again. Right? How many stepped? Two-stepped. Right? What are the two-stepped? Light reaction. And dark reaction, right? Where does light reaction occur? And dark reaction occurs in the stroma, and obviously thylakoid and stroma, it is inside the chloroplast. So where does the site for photosynthesis? Chloroplast. These are the things that we remember, right? Next, what we said, light reaction. When we talk about light reaction, we have products of light reaction, right? Last class we have discussed. And what are the products? We see the formation of ATP and O2, right? Obviously details, when we are going to write the notes, each and everything would be covered in details. As of now, just remember remember the portion that we have learned in the last class. So the products next, together with light reaction, we have also spoke about something called as where does it occur? It occurs in the thylakoid. Why does it occur in the thylakoid? Because the pigments are present. When we talk about the pigments, we understand that the pigments are arranged in the form of groups. How many groups are there? There are two groups, that is PS1 and PS2. What was the first step of photosynthesis? If the question that is asked, I think we have given that answer also. The molecules get excited, or the photosynthetic pigments get excited, and it leads to the ejection of the electrons. And the electrons, they will be having two pathways to follow. That is, either they will be undergoing the non-cyclic pathway, or they will be undergoing the cyclic pathway. So light reaction completes itself in two steps. I think you'll remember. Right? So up till this we have discussed. So once the light reaction is over, what next? The next is dark reaction, right? So everything, obviously details later. So what we'll do is, let's understand the dark reaction today, or the summary of the dark reaction. When we talk dark reaction, where does it occur? Since dark reaction is also a part of photosynthesis, and we know photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplast. So obviously the dark reaction will occur in the chloroplast itself. But where exactly in the chloroplast? We have learned something called as the stroma. So we remember chloroplast as a structure like this, right? We had sac-like structures that were called as thylakoid. Stacks of thylakoids were called as grana, and this portion was called as stroma. So when we talk about dark reaction, where does it occur? It occurs in the stroma part, right? Now talking about dark reaction, so first there are certain points. It is a reaction that is light independent. Next, occurs in the stroma. Reaction utilizes a product of light reaction. Here we are talking about what? ATP and NADPH2, right? If you remember, whenever we talk about the products of light reaction, we have already mentioned that we have talked about the three products, right? ATP, NADPH2, and together with that, oxygen evolution is also something that we see. But when we are talking about the dark reaction, obviously oxygen is not being used up. What happens is inside the chloroplast, when light reaction keeps on occurring, we remember this, right? We remember the pigments and all those, the flow of electrons, etc. So oxygen gets formed, and oxygen being a gas, what happens? It goes out of the chloroplast, and what is left behind is the ATP and NADPH2 that's present or that is formed in the stroma part, and as a result the dark reaction occurs in the stroma. So it utilizes the products of the light reaction. So which product are we talking about? ATP and NADPH2, right? Next, this reaction is also called as the biosynthetic phase, right? So photochemical phase and biosynthetic phase, these are the two terms that are related. The light reaction is called as the photochemical phase, and dark reaction is called as the biosynthetic phase. And why are we using the word synthetic, or it is called as biosynthetic? Obviously because during this phase, the food that is in the form of glucose is being synthesized, right? Next, some other points is like we can also add this. Don't worry about the notes. When we'll be writing the notes, or when we'll start the chapter in details, we'll be having more points to add in. But as of now, again talking about dark reaction, we might talk about who has discovered dark reaction. Scientist called as Blackman. The next point that we understand, the dark reaction is also called as Calvin cycle or C3 cycle. So it was no doubt it was discovered by Blackman, but it is called as Calvin cycle because the detailed description of this cycle was given by Calvin. And because of that, he was awarded the Nobel Prize also. As far as the discovery of the dark reaction is concerned, obviously we'll do it later, right? So when we talk about dark reaction, these are the certain things that we talk about it. And obviously, what is the product of dark reaction? Food or O6. Next, another point is whenever we are using this word dark reaction, that does not mean, it does not mean that this is a reaction that occurs only during the night or during the dark phase, right? So it has nothing to do with night. When does dark reaction occur? It occurs as soon as the light reaction products are ready or the light reaction is over. It's not like this that dark reaction occurs at night. Obviously, it occurs during the daytime itself, right? So the name is given here, but the name has been, it is like, it's not a proper name to give, name the reaction, right? Because whenever we talk about dark reaction, similarly, when we were talking about light reaction, we know light reaction occurs during the light or the daytime. That does not mean that dark reactions occurs during the night time, right? Okay, next is, some more points about the dark reaction. As far as the dark reaction is concerned, it completes itself in 3 steps. And what are the 3 steps? Right? So whenever we are talking about dark reaction, it occurs with the stroma, and this reaction is a 3-step reaction. The first step being carboxylation, reduction, and regeneration. By the word carboxylation, in a very simpler way, the way to understand carboxylation is nothing but addition of carbon dioxide. When we are talking about photosynthesis, we understand that photosynthesis is a process through which the plants take in the carbon dioxide, and ultimately that carbon dioxide forms or converts itself into glucose, right? So taking in of carbon dioxide by the plant is called as carboxylation. So for dark reaction to occur, what is the first step? The plant needs to fix carbon dioxide. And when we are talking about fixation of carbon dioxide, obviously atmospheric carbon dioxide would combine with a molecule that is, or it will combine with a ribose sugar that is present inside the cell. They will combine together and ultimately the reaction would start. So the first, whenever we are talking about carboxylation, we understand nothing but carbon dioxide fixation by the plant. And when we talk about carbon dioxide fixation, who takes in carbon dioxide is obviously the carbon dioxide acceptors. Talking about carbon dioxide acceptors, later we will study that we have 2 different types of carbon dioxide acceptor. We'll discuss that later. So once the process has started, once the plants will take in carbon dioxide, the first step would occur. After that, this carbon dioxide that has been fixed would undergo the second step, that is reduction. In this case, the simpler way to understand is that carbon dioxide that was taken in the plant would get reduced to. So the first step talks about taking in of carbon dioxide or fixation of carbon dioxide. The second step talks about what happens to the carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide gets converted to food, right? So that is the reduction process. And finally, we have the third process that is called as regeneration. What is regeneration? Formation of something again is called as regeneration. And by the word regeneration, we are talking about regeneration of the carbon dioxide acceptor. So talking about dark reaction is a 3-step process. We have a carbon dioxide acceptor, right, inside the plant. This carbon dioxide acceptor would be taken in or fixing the atmospheric carbon dioxide, right? What that would be the first step. Second step, this carbon dioxide would get reduced to. And what would be the third step is this carbon dioxide acceptor would be formed again, right? Of the CO2 acceptor. Now the question is, why is this step necessary? this step is necessary so that the cycle keeps on continuing, right? Because if you are talking about this carbon dioxide acceptor, when it combines with carbon dioxide, it will not remain in its form, it will get converted to something else, and ultimately the cycle will start. But when this cycle starts and once the food is formed, we will see from one turn of this cycle, it is just one molecule that is synthesized, but we know the plants are in need of food again and again, so that the cycle, if the plant wants food again and again, the cycle has to run again and again. And when will the cycle run again and again? Only if the carbon dioxide acceptor, who starts the first step, is being formed again and again. So we have these 3 steps for dark reaction. Actually, what we are doing in the class is just we are having a summary. We are not going into details. This is something that I have been repeating it again and again, because obviously we have to learn more in details. But up till now, we just had an idea. Next is talking about this dark reaction. We'll also have to talk about types of dark reaction. Types of dark reaction. When we talk about types of dark reaction, generally we talk about 3 types, right? The most common type is the C3 cycle or the Kelvin cycle, right? Apart from this cycle, we see actually why I'm talking about the types of dark reaction, because we will later study that the same type of dark reaction is not something that is seen in each and every type of plant. There are different types of plants who will be following the dark reaction in a slight different manner, and according to something called as the first product of carboxylation. Right? Carboxylation, I think you remember, we were talking about the fixing of carbon dioxide, right? So each and every plant, if it has to undergo photosynthesis, obviously they would be fixing carbon dioxide, and depending on this fixation and what is the first product that is formed. So certain plants, we will see that they would be forming the first product as a 3-carbon compound. So accordingly, that plant would be called as a C3 plant. So we have certain plants that would be called as C4 plants, etc., etc. As far as C3 and C4 plants are concerned, plants, whenever we talk about different types of plants, plants on the basis of if you talk about plant kingdom point of view, plants are of 5 types. Just will come slight away from this topic. If you are talking about plants or types of plants according to the plant kingdom, from this point of view, we have algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. So I think you all know, right? When we talk about types of plants, right? From plant kingdom concept, we have these 5. From photosynthesis point of view, we'll come across 3 types of plants. Right? So from photosynthesis point of view, we see 3 types of plants: C3 plants, C4 plants, and CEAM plants. So different plants will have different type of dark reaction. So in C3 plants, they will be undergoing the C3 cycle. In C4 plants, they will be having C4 cycle. Together with that, they will be undergoing the C3 cycle. And in CEAM plants also, we'll see the combination of the light reactions. We'll see the combination of the C4 reactions first, and after that, we'll be talking about the C3 reaction. So from photosynthesis point of view, we have 3 types of plants. Depending on different plants, the type of dark reaction that we see is different. So how many types of dark reaction we come to study? We have to talk about 3 types. The first one being the C3 cycle. The number 2 would be the C4 cycle, and number 3 would be the CEAM cycle. Which plants are called as C3, which plants are called as C4? Those plants in which the first product of carboxylation is a 3-carbon compound, those plants are called as C3. The first product of carboxylation being a 4-carbon compound would be called as C4. And as far as CAM plants or CAM cycle is concerned, it is a cycle that is seen in a specific type of plant. Those are called as succulents. Do you have any idea about succulent? What is the succulent? If I give certain examples, maybe you will have an idea about a succulent. The best example of succulent could be so plants like Bryophyllum, agave, aloe vera, etc. These are called as succulents. I think you have seen that certain plants, there are some specific type of plants, they will have some a special type of leaves or fleshy leaves, and if you just break them, a gel-like substance comes out from those leaves, right? So those plants are called as succulents. So in case of succulents, the dark reaction is what is called as the CAM cycle, or in other way around, what is the where do you see the CAM cycle? The CAM cycle is seen in the group called as, or the plants called as succulents. They would be belonging to the family called as Crassulaceae, and so it is called as crassulation acid metabolism cycle. Details later. Okay. So this is almost about dark reaction. Another thing that you need to remember is, no doubt dark reaction could be of different types, but the one point that we should remember is, until and unless C3 cycle operates, glucose would not be formed. So if you are talking about the C3 plants, so obviously only the 3C cycle would be operating in those plants and the glucose would be formed. If you are talking about C4 plants and CAM plants, C4 plants would have a combination of two types of reaction. It will have, later we will study that they will be having two areas where carbon dioxide gets fixed and the cycle keeps on running, right? So in each and every plant or in each and every cycle, it is mandatory to have or to undergo the C3 cycle, because if Calvin cycle does not operate, food does not get synthesized. Okay. Okay. So this is almost the summary of photosynthesis. So we have started with light reaction. We now have an idea about dark reaction. Where does light reaction occur? It occurs in the thylakoid. Where does dark reaction occur? It occurs in the stroma. What is the product of the light reaction? We see the formation of three products, that is ATP, NADPH2 and oxygen. Out of these three products, oxygen gets, it comes out from the cell organelle, and it's only ATP and NADPH that remains, and those are being used during the dark reaction. And once the dark reaction operates, what is the product of the dark reaction? Is obviously the food in the form of the carbohydrate, and what we are talking about is nothing but C6H12 and O6, right? So this is the content. Together with that, another two topics that we need to study in this chapter is photorespiration, C2 cycle of photorespiration, and finally we'll be talking about factors affecting the rate of photosynthesis, right? So talking about cycles, C3 cycle, C4 cycle and CAM cycle related with the dark reaction, and together with that we'll be talking about something called as photorespiration. Photorespiration later we'll study in details, but as of now, photorespiration is something that is very essential for C3 plants, but no doubt it's essential, but it's generally considered as a wasteful process because it is not related with ATP formation. Instead, ATP is being consumed for running this cycle, right? And why is it called as photorespiration? Where does this cycle operates? what is the condition when the cell will undergo photorespiration, etc., etc. Everything in details we will study. Just to have a simple idea about photorespiration, this is the cycle that generally operates in the C3 plants when inside the cell the amount of carbon dioxide is less as compared to the oxygen present inside the cell. So, we are talking about a cell, we know that they would be taking in atmospheric carbon dioxide for photosynthesis to occur. This atmospheric carbon dioxide would be accepted by something called as a carbon dioxide acceptor, and later we will be studying about something called as RUBP, who acts as a carbon dioxide acceptor. So carbon dioxide acceptor that is present in the cell, they will have a tendency to accept atmospheric carbon dioxide so that food could be synthesized. But sometimes what happens, inside this cell, the amount of oxygen increases and the amount of carbon dioxide that is present inside the cell is less. Under this condition, what happens is RUBP, instead of taking CO2, what they will be taking is oxygen. So, once the cell takes in oxygen, we will be talking about it as respiration, and since it is light dependent, we will be using a word called as photorespiration. Do not get confused as of now, because obviously we have to study in details, but what I am trying to say in a nutshell is, when we are talking about photorespiration, it is something that occurs in the C3 plants, right? When the C2 cycle occurs, C2 cycle occurs under, especially under one condition, when the amount of oxygen inside the cell is more as compared to the amount of carbon dioxide inside the cell. What happens in the C2 cycle? RUBP, or the carbon dioxide acceptor, who acts or generally acts or usually act as a carbon dioxide acceptor, will now act as an oxygen acceptor, and then they will have a different set of reactions, and that would be called as photorespiration of C2 cycle. Right. Apart from this, next we have something called as chemiosmotic hypothesis. This is also something that we have to study. Chemiosmotic hypothesis would talk about the process of ATP formation. We have been saying that when we are talking about light reaction, one of the product of light reaction is ATP. Now, to explain how ATP is being formed or what led to the formation of ATP is explained by chemiosmotic hypothesis. It was first proposed by a scientist called as Peter Mitchell, right? And he has properly explained as what are the reasons because of which ATP gets synthesized. When we are talking about ATP formation, the point to be remembered is ATP is not only formed during photosynthesis, obviously it is formed during respiration also. I think we know whenever we talk about cellular respiration, or if I ask you the question, why do we respire? We respire to get energy, and energy in the form of obviously ATP. So, we understand that whenever cellular respiration is or whenever a cell undergoes respiration, at that time also ATP gets formed or synthesized, and it is photosynthesis also who is responsible for the formation of ATP. So, in both the process, what is the mechanism behind ATP formation? It is something that is explained by chemiosmotic hypothesis. So, this is the content of the chapter. So, up till now, we had a summary of the chapter, and from the next class onwards, what we'll do is, we'll start going in details. We'll be starting from the introduction part. What are the points that we have to study? We have to talk about the contributions of the different scientists. We have to talk about the different types of experiments that lead to the formation of certain types of results, right? All the name of the scientists that are given in your NCERT book, class, all the experiments. So, we'll be starting from the next class. So, I think up till now, you had an idea about the chapter. So, what we can do is, since we understood the chapter, let's see, we'll do certain questions. Let's see whether we can answer them or not, right? And it is only from the next class that we'll go in details. So, from the portion that we have learned in the first and today's class, let's try to answer these questions. Okay. The first question is, So this is the first question, and the options are so these are the options. Synthesis of complex organic substances from simple inorganic raw materials in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll is called as, and this is a dash type of a process. I think this is the first thing that we have studied in the first class, right? So which process are we talking about? We are obviously talking about photosynthesis, right? And what type of a process it is? Anabolic. So what will be the first answer? It is photosynthesis and anabolic. So we'll go to the next question. Okay, we have to write it again. Options are so this is the second question. Which of the following is produced during the light phase of photosynthesis? So we are asking about the products of the light reaction. When we are talking about the products of the light reaction, we talk about three products, that is ATP, NADPH2 and oxygen. So let's try. Is it only ATP? No. Is it only NADPH? No. So obviously the correct answer would be ATP and NADPH. As far as carbohydrates is concerned, we are talking about the food in the form of a glucose. Obviously that's a product of the dark reaction. We'll move to the next question. Remember this word. So the question is about the reaction center of PS1 and PS2. What was PS1 and PS2? The two groups of pigments that are involved in light reaction. And when we are talking about the group activity, if you remember, we have used the presence, or we have talked about the presence of a very, very important member who forms the reaction center. So PS1 is a group of photosynthetic pigments. PS2 is also a group of photosynthetic pigment. And in both the two groups, who acts as a reaction center is obviously chlorophyll A molecules. We have discussed it in the last class. And as far as the reaction center is concerned, talking about PS1, who forms the reaction center? P700, and talking about this one, it is P680. The next question. Which pigment acts directly to convert light energy to chemical energy? And the options are chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, xanthophyll, and D would be carotenoids. Which pigment acts directly to convert light energy to chemical energy? So, light energy to chemical energy, you can also understand this in a very simpler way, as like maybe the question is asking about the most important pigment of photosynthesis. So when we are talking about pigments, the universal pigment or the most important pigment is chlorophyll A. Chlorophyll is obviously the most important photosynthetic pigment, but I think you all remember we have said that chlorophyll molecules could be of different types, like chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, C, D, E, etc. And out of this, the most important pigment that is associated with photosynthesis is chlorophyll A. Next question, I think it would be number 5. Usually, chloroplasts align themselves along the walls of dash to get Usually, chloroplasts align themselves along the walls of dash to get the optimum quality of the incident light. Option A is mesophyll cells. Bundle slit cells. C would be thylakoid. And D is stroma lamellae. Okay. Usually, chloroplasts align themselves along the walls of dash to get the optimum quality of incident light. So we are talking about that light reaction, and who takes in the light. When we are talking about who takes in the light, we understand we have talked about the photosynthetic pigments, and where the photosynthetic pigments present, they are present in the thylakoid, or we understand they are present in the outer membrane of the thylakoid. But looking at this question, would this option be correct? No, the answer would not be thylakoid, because the question is being asked about chloroplast and not about the photosynthetic pigment. If the question was where are the photosynthetic pigments present, or where do you find them aligned, they are found in the thylakoid membrane. But the question is about chloroplast. So what they are asking is, where will you find the chloroplast? So as far as thylakoid and stroma lamellae is concerned, those are the parts that are found inside the chloroplast. The question is about the organelle. So this organelle will obviously not be found inside the thylakoid. So this is not the correct option. It is not, that is something that is found in the stroma lamellae. By the way, do you remember what is a stroma lamellae? Fret canal, stroma lamellae. We have talked about stacks of grana being connected with each other. Those are called as stroma lamellae. So this option is wrong, this option is wrong. So where will you find the chloroplast? We know chloroplasts are found in the mesophyll cells, and that's the reason why photosynthesis occurs inside the mesophyll cell. But together with mesophyll cell, we will be studying something called as bundle sheath cells also, which is a characteristic of C4 plants, and later we will study that chloroplasts are also found in the bundle sheath cell. Right? So as far as the presence of chloroplast, we have two options that seems to be correct. It is something that is present in the mesophyll cell, it is something that is present in the bundle sheath cells also. But the point to remember is bundle sheath cell is not something that you will see in each and every plant. But mesophyll cells is something that is present in each and every plant. So we have the word usually, and so the answer would be mesophyll cells. Right? So where are chloroplasts present? If the question would have been like that, chloroplasts could be found both inside the mesophyll cells and also in a cell called as bundle sheath cell. However, bundle sheath cell is not something that is present in each and every type of plant. So usually chloroplasts are present in the mesophyll cells. I think it's understood. So these are the types of questions we have to talk about. Let's talk about one last question. Option A, photosystem 2. Option B, thylakoid lumen. Do you remember this word called as lumen? What was lumen? Thylakoid lumen. The inside portion of the thylakoid is called as lumen. Stromal matrix, and the fourth option is photosystem 1. So the question is, in photosynthesis, the light-independent reactions takes place at light-dependent reaction and light-independent reaction. If we are talking about light-dependent reaction, we are talking about the light reaction of photosynthesis, and light-independent reaction is obviously the dark reaction. So what is the question? The question is, they are just asking what is the place where dark reaction occurs. We know light reaction occurs in the thylakoid and dark reaction occurs in the stroma part of the chloroplast. So the answer would be the stromal matrix. So today in the class we have discussed few questions, so that the portions that we have learned in the last two classes somewhat just to check ourselves whether we have understood the concept or not. So this type of questions, and there are much more questions that we'll be discussing in the class later, so that your concept becomes clearer. right? So for today, I think this is all, right? And once we put into the habit of discussing more questions, doing more MCQs, each and every chapter would become clearer, right? So thank you. This is all for today. And in the next class, we'll be starting this chapter in details. Thank you so much.